We came to the jungle looking for peace.
America is corrupt. It sends our children to die in Vietnam. Its system keeps you poor, keeps you segregated, keeps you powerless.
We told you our way was better. Living in socialism as God intended. And because we preach the truth, they call us a cult.
So they hate us. They want to kill us. That is why we had to leave their sick country.
So we came here, to South America, to the jungle, to isolate ourselves, to purify our community. But still they hate us because our success proves that their society is wrong, that their system is cruel, that their way is doomed.
So they are coming for us. They will infiltrate us. They will sabotage us. They will try to kidnap our people.
But we are ready. We take up arms, and we will have no mercy for anyone that violates our home. Attacking us will just show the world how corrupt they are.
So let them call us a cult, because we stand firm for what we believe.
We have God on our side, and we will not let them take a single one of us alive.
Hey everybody! Welcome to the stream. As always, I am Suzanne, brand manager at Fellow Traveler, and today I'm joined by Richard. Richard, can you tell us who you are?
Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Rouse. I'm the director, designer, and writer on The Church in the Darkness, a forthcoming game from Fellow Traveler.
Yes, indeed. And yes, for the people who may possibly not know, what is The Church in the Darkness?
Yeah, so we are a action infiltration game set inside a religious cult in the 1970s. So in the game, you're trying to find your nephew who's joined the cult and see if he wants to get out or not. But sort of the interesting thing, and you're sort of infiltrating the game, imagine like Metal Gear, like old Metal Gear type gameplay. So it's a little retro in that regard. But the other interesting thing about it is you don't know if the cult group is bad and actually like apocalyptically bad, or if they're just really weird and want to do their own thing. And we change that up every time you play, because the game has a little bit of a procedural narrative. So you're trying to figure out, is this version of the cult that I'm dealing with now, the personalities of these preachers, are they more apocalyptic or not? And should I let Alex stay, or should I make him leave? Should I try to confront the cult leaders? So it's designed to be replayable with sort of a procedural narrative thing.
Yeah, there are many choices within each individual scenario. There are also multiple scenarios. I'm basically just repeating what you just said. But isn't that fun? Yeah, so this is a game that we have been having a lot of fun with at Fellow Traveler, especially recently. As you guys know, there was, I think we'll show it in a little bit, there was the second trailer that was just a couple of months ago, aired for the first time during the Kind of Funny press conference, which was, you know, this cool new thing that had happened, and we were really, really happy to have Church in the Darkness included in that. And you also just got home from going to GDC and PAX East back to back.
That's right.
Somehow.
Yes. So yes, no, it's the March Madness of game development.
Yeah.
It's having that and other events that I didn't go to. Like I didn't also go to South by Southwest and EGX in Europe or something. But
yeah. I think it's
we did
now, and then EGX proper is later in the year.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I've been going to GDC for ages, and I almost always do a talk there. So did that, and then also got to show the game to some press there, and meet up with members of the team, and meet up with other developers who I hadn't met before. That was cool. Who, you know, we like each other over the internet only, so it's always nice to meet people in real life. Yeah, so that was great, and then, you know, is back home for around 48 hours before I got back on the plane. Went east to go set up our booth at PAX East, which is a lovely show. We've done a couple times before, and just a nice, you know, I'm based in Seattle, so getting to
Yeah.
GDC, getting to Boston is a little more work, but it's nice to be on the other half of the continent and show off the game there as well. Hopefully someday show it in Europe too. I don't want to be North America exclusive here, but when you're on an indie budget, sometimes you focus on what you can get to. But yeah, PAX Boston has always been great for us. So yeah, had a good time there as well, showing we were part of the Indie Mega Booth, who've always been good to us as well. So.
Yeah, we are big fans of Indie Mega Booth and all the opportunities that they provide us from time to time. I feel like there's a whole sub-conversation we could have about the frequent flyer miles that just go through game dev as a general thing.
Right. No, and yet the airlines all seem to be optimizing away the benefits of those miles. So get miles, but they're not worth what they used to be worth.
Yeah, I know. I remember reading a thing. This is I digress, but this is completely unrelated to the game. Reading a thing that said you should only use your frequent flyer miles if you can get 2 cents per mile.
Oh,
if you're buying a flight with them.
Calculate it out.
Yeah, well, because there are so many deals that, as you say, are not actually really worth it. Maybe. But in any case,
this sort of crass capitalism is exactly what the people of the Collective Justice Mission are against.
Good segue. good
Justice
save.
Mission. They're the cult in the game.
Yeah.
Back in the 70s, so before frequent flyer miles, but I think those were an 80s invention. But they saw consumerism and people being obsessed with making money, and then also America's politics and the wars, America's all this stuff they hated. So they're like, we're going to move down to South America and build our own society built on what we believe in.
Yeah.
And it's the interesting thing about the group to me is that to some people who are maybe tired of consumerism or whatever, it sounds like kind of a good thing, right? We're going to go build our own society and live by our own principles. And they say a lot of stuff about, a lot of the things they say are things a lot of people would agree with, including myself. But it's just how far are they taking it, right? And how dangerous are they? And they're using, they're heavily armed. As I always say to people, whatever version of the cult you have, they're always going to shoot at you when you come trespassing in their home, basically. So they're not pacifists either when it comes to defending what they've built, which is sort of where the gameplay comes into it. But, and that might give you pause to think, well, how good can they be if they've got all these guns, right?
Right.
So it's sort of an interesting thing. And, some people would say, well, if someone's defending their home, that's their right, right? And so there's lots of ways to look at them, and we just want to leave that open to players' interpretation, basically.
Yeah. Actually, Adasergey in chat kind of mentions that they're fascinated by communal and society behaviors and how people behave, whether it's their actions are good or bad for the rest of society, which is, I think, exactly that sort of human motivation focus that you're trying to hit on in the Church of the Darkness. And we're trying to make people sort of think about as they play and interpret both their own actions and the actions of this commune that they're infiltrating. I should also mention here that, folks, if you're all watching us, first of all, thank you, and feel free to pop questions into the chat like Adasergey is. We are happy to take those as we progress, whenever we have a second to. And actually, there's another question. Can you give some hints on some of the key choices that will create these unique experiences in the game? And can we see some other principles like communism, or are there branches that you take within the religious focus?
Yeah, that's interesting bunch of questions there.
Several questions, perhaps.
There's a couple of key ways you make choices in the game. Often, we kind of have our core mechanics of infiltration and stealth, and in the keeping with games that we like in that genre, you're able to choose, how lethally do I play? If I use non-lethal tactics, but that has some disadvantages to it. However, if I use lethal tactics, that has disadvantages too. So we're trying to balance it. Sometimes you have a game where you can be lethal or non-lethal, but if you're non-lethal, it's just less fun. We're trying to come up with techniques where it's still fun to get non-lethal stuff, like a tranquilizer gun, or and certain other things, like if you play really lethally and they catch you, because you can get captured in the game. If you get caught, they may just execute you and you don't have to keep playing. But if you haven't been playing lethally, they let you they leave you in the cage, and then you're able to break out and keep playing. So you kind of lose that if you're playing too lethally. So we're just trying to balance that out. So that's kind of your classic choices you get in a stealthy infiltration game. On top of that, we've got a lot of key narrative choices you make too. So, and those all manifest themselves in these characters you meet and whether you go help them out in different ways, but then also, the main objective of the game is finding your nephew, Alex. And do you help him leave? Does he want to leave? Does he not want to leave? Do you, knock him out and throw him over your shoulder and take him out anyway? Or do you let him stay? Or do you whatever? And he'll also tell you about the cult leaders and what he thinks of them. And then do you agree with what he's saying? And if so, maybe you want to talk to the cult leaders. Maybe you want to confront the cult leaders and stop them in some way. And there's different ways you can do that. So trying to give you a lot of, and then all of those things lead to a ton of different endings you can get. So yeah, lots of choices there. And you can play the game. I like to emphasize again, the lethal, non-lethal choice extends all the way to the narrative choices.
Yeah.
So you can get any ending. You can get a number of endings, both good and bad, but we try not to tell you what good and bad is. It's just, here's the ending you got, and then it's up to the player to decide how they feel about it. But we also try to, there's always a non-lethal path.
Always. Yeah, and this whole setting is very interesting. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you decided to base a game on a cult situation and what kind of research you did, Richard?
Yeah, so cults are fascinating to me, particularly as a game designer, because often a lot of the games I like are about some self-contained world that is different from ours. Sometimes it's different because it's fantasy or sci-fi, but sometimes it's a real world place, but it's just confined to a specific place. So for example, I used to work, or years ago, I made the Suffering horror games, and those were set inside a prison that is haunted, right? So obviously it had a supernatural element, but also was a prison, a real world place that's sort of its own society within a larger society. And when I started getting into cults, I realized, wow, this would be a great setting for a game, because often these groups are very insular. They build their own complex, or in this case, they move to another country and built their own town, and that creates a cool little self-contained ecosystem that you can go explore in a game. So I've always liked that a lot, and it just seemed like the ideal, and I wanted to try to make one of these games without any fantasy or sci-fi in it, just to keep it close to reality without necessarily being a documentary. And it just felt like cults are weird and out there enough that they're still really interesting to be in, but they're also kind of more intense because this sort of thing really happens. So it just seemed like a great setting for a game, and that's how I came to make this.
Yeah. And how much, I know that people always ask this question, how much did you draw on those real world examples that you took a look from?
Yeah, totally.
Look at, not from.
Yeah.
Words are fun.
70s, I found from having read up on some, was like a golden era for cults in a way.
Yeah.
Where, so many, particularly the movements of the 60s, like peace movement and hippies and so forth, they had all tried these different things, and then the war in Vietnam had still happened, and things had escalated, and there was fear of nuclear annihilation from the Cold War and stuff. And so this was all still happening, and there was sort of a sense of loss of hope in the 70s, which led to people taking this more radical step to actually leave society, go build something else, reject society more fully. So you had a number of groups popping up during that era. Obviously, people often compare the game to Jonestown, temple that moved down to South America, and that's true. The South America thing is inspired from that, and some of the architecture you'll see there is inspired from that. But the personalities of the cult leaders are fairly different. We looked at other groups like the Rajneeshpuram, who are now famous because they just had a series on Netflix, Wild Wild Country, which is quite good.
Oh, cool.
But they were something we looked at. There's another one I often mention is the Source family. They have a documentary you can check out where it was a guru who was also had a rock band, and this got a very LA sort of cult, and they were very big in LA. And what's that?
What is it about cults and really good music? I don't understand. I'll ask you about that in a second.
Yeah,
yes.
Right. Anyway. Anyway, that's an interesting case because they had a lot of similarities to other cult groups, and as you look at cult groups, you see these similarities. Have a really strong leader, They usually have, a sex thing happening one way or another, where the leader's sleeping with everyone, or everyone has to be very celibate, or something. They always go to some extreme.
Yeah.
But then the Source family is interesting because shared a lot of those commonalities, but then didn't end in a tragedy exactly. So they moved to Hawaii and things fell apart, and the leader ended up dying in this accident. He was sort of a daredevil, and that led to this accident happening. But everyone else just dispersed and went on, and some of them became bankers, and some of them still live in Hawaii on their own little communes or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's the interesting thing to me about cult groups is you hear about the tragedies or the ones that end in some crime or whatever. So there are many groups like this that just go do their thing for a while and then it falls apart, and they run out of money, or they run out of will, or the key person dies, or whatever it is, and then everyone goes and does something else, goes back to their lives or forms other groups or whatever it is. So when people say, how can we let these groups exist, it's like, well, most of them don't go wrong, and if you live in a free society, people should be able to go follow their own beliefs and try to do things differently if they want to, right? So I found that interesting, and that all came out of that research we did. So.
Yeah. And as you say, like, a lot of them are certainly not violent. They do just sort of want to be left alone, and then might just stay together for 5, 10, 50 years and then sort of disband, or might be a different scenario. And that is reflected in the Church in the Darkness, and that there are lots of different types of cults and situations that they,
and that's sort of, for me as a game person, a person who likes telling stories in games, one of the things that I feel is unique about game storytelling is you can show multiple sides to a story. You can show how someone, it can go wrong, or it can turn out in a less wrong way. And sort of when you watch a movie or something, you're getting one version of that story, right? Because choices are made. It's just that one thing. Here, it's you can make different choices that lead to different outcomes, and you can get different versions of the cult that lead to different outcomes, and all of that.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Okay, so we were talking about music. Can we talk a little bit about the amazing music that happens in the Church in the Darkness? And I don't understand what it is about cults having really good music, but it's like a thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, when people, I think it's interesting, when people believe strongly in something, they tend to be passionate about other things as well. So you may find groups that, often the leaders will also, they'll think they're so good they can also make amazing music or whatever, and then they have this captive audience who will say anything they do is great. And so this can lead to, they're actually happen to be talented, can lead to good music, or it can lead to some pretty terrible music.
Fair.
So you've seen it go both ways. And that group, the Source family, the music they made is actually sort of a cult classic among a lot of musicians.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't like the guy who was running it wasn't so much a musician, but other people in the group were really into it and were actually quite talented. And so their albums, and they actually reformed and did a tour in the 2000s or something like that.
Oh, okay. Why, little reunion. Yay.
But we have a lot of, germane to the Church in the Darkness, we have a lot of music in the game, both sort of soundtrack music that's this sort of minimalist, post-rocky sort of stuff that I like. But then also we have our voice actors who play the cult leaders are also musicians. So they did a number of songs for the game. So for people who don't know, our actors are Mclain, who's famous for being GLaDOS in Portal. In addition to many other great projects with Valve, like Dota and stuff. And then her real-life husband, John Patrick Lowry, he was the sniper in Team Fortress 2 and has been in almost every Valve game going back to Half-Life 2. And he plays Isaac Walker, the other cult leader. And he's not only a trained musician, but also a composer. So he wrote a bunch of songs for the game, and then Ellen and he do them as duets sometimes, or solo pieces, depending. And those are all worked into the story, and some of them you'll hear during gameplay, and those will change based on which version of the cult you have. Some of them you'll hear over the ending, basically. So in order to hear all the songs, you'll have to get a number of the endings to sort of get the complete soundtrack in the game. So.
Yeah, and Ellen and John are pretty fantastic, and you end up hearing their voices quite a lot through the game. The way that everything is structured, the way that I should let you talk about this actually.
It's all good.
Very leading question. How will Ellen and Patrick's voice acting show up in the game?
Yeah, so they, like many good cult leaders, they like to talk to their people a lot. So as you're infiltrating the Freedom Town that they've built, you'll hear them talking over the public address system, basically nonstop. They basically are constantly either talking about, how things are going at Freedom Town, or why America is bad for this reason, or quoting some, quoting some of the Bible passages that Isaac Walker likes, or quoting some socialist thought that Rebecca Walker likes. So you'll hear a lot from them as you're playing, and then they'll also react to your presence in the game too, and change what they're saying based on whether you've been playing violently or not, and what stage of the game you're at, and stuff like that. So it's a bit of a dynamic system that way too.
Yeah, this is very much a game where, as we've already touched on a little bit, the way that you choose to play very much will influence how the cult, the everyone else is going to react to you, and it also obviously influences the end result that you end up getting. So it's sort of a player-driven narrative in that only if you make certain actions can you achieve certain results.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And it's both, it's a combination of sort of the, the personalities of those two people, which we change every time, and then how you react to that as the player, and then get those different endings with the different songs.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. We mentioned a second ago that there was a Kind of Funny conference, which was that just what they ended up calling it? The Kind of Funny?
I think it was the showcase.
The showcase.
Showcase.
Yeah. The press showcase. So this year, as a quick industry cool recap, because I know you guys care so much, but this year PlayStation had to cancel the PlayStation Experience.
That's right.
And so because that happened and people were bummed that it wasn't going to happen this year, Kind of Funny stepped up and said, hey, we're going to do our own press showcase. That'll be fun, right? And it ended up turning out to be quite fun. I'm sure it was stressful, because kudos on putting something like that together. But yeah, and the Church of the Darkness got to have a brand new trailer released during that showcase.
Yeah, we had been... I'd met Greg at a press event before, and he'd really liked the game.
Yeah.
Greg from Kind of Funny, and I'd kept in touch with him, and we had been at PlayStation Experience before, than the ones they did have too. So when we heard that was off, we were bummed, because it was a great show to go do, because PlayStation fans are very loyal, enthusiastic, and it's a very well-run show. But it was cool that Greg liked the game enough to say, hey, do you want to be in this showcase we're doing, sort of at the same time and in the same spirit as PlayStation Experience, right? Though it included non-Sony games as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was cool to do that, and then we got to work on something cool for that.
Yeah, Greg Miller, I feel like, has played this game almost as much as anyone has played the game outside of yourself, and I mean, maybe now me and the rest of Fellow Traveler. Yeah. But yeah, there is a really fun video you can find very easily on YouTube of Greg playing the game with, I can't remember who else is on camera with him.
It was Nick Scarpino.
Nick Scarpino, okay. And they're playing a demo build of the Church in the Darkness, and it's very entertaining. Because he's already gotten quite good at it by that point, but it's still it's a game that rewards skill sometimes. Right. And if you mess up, it can have fun, interesting results.
Right. So we do have, reward skill, but we are, as you and I have talked about, working on our difficulty levels, and letting people who just come for the narrative and maybe aren't hardcore console players or something like that, they can hopefully play the game as well. And then we've got harder difficulties for those who really want to be pushed. And I like playing on the harder difficulties because I played the game so darn much. It's good to keep it interesting by making it difficult.
That is a really important thing actually to mention, is that this is very much a game with multiple different difficulty options. So if you're a player like me, I am not good at stealth games or at any kind of infiltration, anything pretty much that involves skill, honestly, in games. And so I might come into the playing the Church in the Darkness, and I would probably go for playing on easy difficulty, and that's dandy because that can have just slightly tweak the gameplay so that it's a little bit better for me. And I think for a lot of some people that maybe that's a good way to start playing the game. But then there's all these other awesome higher difficulty levels, so that if you're like, oh well, you know, this kind of mechanic, oh that's old hat to me, I know all about that, you can dive right into challenging yourself and enjoying some of the aspects of those higher level difficulties, which is what those are there for people.
And we definitely see that when we do show it at PAX, just how different people are and how they approach a game like this and how hard they find it and how they feel about dying and having to restart and stuff like that. So I definitely don't want to exclude anybody from the game. It was definitely my vision to have the difficulty levels in there from the very start. I'm a big fan of those. So it just allows more people to check it out, and allows people who want difficult to have that too. So that's what a systems-based game is good at, is you're allowed to tune those things to let as many people experience as possible.
Yes, and also it's okay if you die.
You're supposed to die. You're supposed to die a bunch before you get to an ending. This
is very much a game that you can play multiple times. That replaying it will actually kind of enhance your enjoyment of the game, because there are so many endings that you can possibly get and so many different ways that you can choose to play. So you can play the same scenario in a different way and you might get a totally different ending even from that scenario. And
we change up the gameplay too. Like you're not always starting in the same part of the map, and your objectives move around, and what loot you find will be different. And
oh my god, yeah. I remember the first time I started in a different part of the map and I was like, oh no.
What's all this then?
I know how to sneak around here. Oh no, the card is in a different place. What do I do? Yeah. So, Adasorge asks in the chat, how do you balance narrative and gameplay in a way where they don't take away from each other, but they both add to the experience? It's a really good question.
That is, and it's often can be problematic in games that have a strong core gameplay that doesn't fully consider the narrative from the beginning necessarily, and then the narrative maybe shows up later in development or made by a different team or something like that. And sometimes it's like, here's some cutscenes, and then here's some gameplay, and then here's some cutscenes. I think it's different for a game like this because from the start, my background is doing both game design and writing. And I've sort of done both on a bunch of projects. So from the very start of the project, there was no point of the game where it didn't have the gameplay or it didn't have the narrative. They like both showed up from the very start. So it was designing systems that would allow us to tell the story through while you're playing the game, as opposed to pausing the game so you could get the story. And just trying to, every choice we made was informed by both how will that affect the gameplay, but then also how will that affect the story. So I like to think it's a little more seamless than some other experiences, and that's how I like to play. For me, my favorite games, I never have to stop playing. Like I'm always interacting, I'm always doing stuff. And even when you're in a conversation in this game, if you don't position yourself right, a guard might sneak up on you or something like that. So you always have to be aware. You're still getting some narrative, but you're staying on your toes. And that again is something that gets tuned on the different difficulties, but it's something like you're always in the game while you're playing as much as possible. So I think just being aware of those two things at the same time and balancing them helps make a more cohesive experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, and we were talking about the kind of funny conference. So I want to show people this really pretty new trailer that we showed. This has been out publicly, but just in case anyone hasn't seen it, I want to play it here today. And what was different in this trailer, Richard? I'm grinning like an idiot because I liked making this trailer with you. It was very fun to put together, and with M. Joshua, who we worked with to make this trailer.
It's a Steam trailer maker. Yeah, I saw him at PAX East, and remember a few years before when we were at PAX East, he came up to the booth and was like, guys, I loved your trailer. Because he had seen the first one we'd made, and that was how we first met, and that led to becoming friends. And then when the opportunity to do this new trailer with Fellow Traveler came up, it's like, hey, maybe we could use him because he's already a fan of what we're doing. But
worked out very well.
We wanted to, because we showed the first trailer at the top, and people can go seek that out if they missed it. But that one really focuses on the cult leaders and our star voice actors. But we have other actors in the game too, because all the characters are voiced. And I'd always wanted to show them off a little bit. So we made a new trailer that sort of focuses on characters other than the cult leaders. So maybe we could roll it, and then I could talk more about who those actors are after.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's play that now.
I joined looking for a better world for everyone. When Isaac said we had to move to Batuela, I didn't know what to think of that. But I did know living in the U.S. was no life for me.
Life didn't give me much. I saw enough darkness living in the ghetto to know I couldn't survive that. Had to be a better way.
Things change when you have kids. You want them to grow up in a society where they will have a fair chance. I love the education here. I love the values my kids are learning. Hard work, justice for all.
Isaac and Rebecca Walker spoke the truth about the U.S. government. We had no choice but to get out.
But some people here scare me. They're so devoted.
Now we gotta get ready to fight for what we believe in.
They said this place would be paradise, but there are many problems here. The ways they discipline, the long hours, the guns.
Even if we don't make it, maybe someone will hear our voices.
Can you tell us a little bit about what we were trying to highlight with this trailer that we were not able to show in the that wasn't yet shown in the previous one?
Yeah, no, we that was all about the other characters in Freedom Town, like because it's certainly interesting to learn about the cult leaders and what motivates them and why they built this, but there's the flip side of this. The story that often gets told less in cults is, why did people join in the first place? And in that trailer we went through a number of characters, including the main character you're trying to meet, Alex, your nephew who has joined, but then also just other people who had different motivations. Like one person's a mother and she's worried about her kids, and one person is came back from Vietnam and is really disillusioned with the way the government did that war and so forth. And just looking at these different people who had different reasons for joining and why they were there, because so often we dismiss cult members as being crazy or brainwashed or whatever, but often in each individual person's case, you dig in and you find out, oh, there's a good reason why this person had good reasons, even if they might have made the wrong choices. And often the way these groups work, sadly, is once you're in, they encourage you to shun everyone else in your life, like your other family members or friends. So after a while, you're like, well, I can't leave. My entire life is here. So then, that's why as bad things start happening, people don't immediately leave often. Some people do immediately leave, but others will think, well, this is just a little bit of a downside. It's like being in a job that has good and bad things, right? It's like you put up with the terrible boss because you love your coworkers, or vice versa, right? And being in a cult is similar, except it's just more all-consuming. Often. Your entire belief system, it's everything you do is usually tied up in it. And I want to explore that in that character trailer, just to see some of those other people who you can meet in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Ada Sergey asks, what's the challenge of doing voice acting in video game production? I'm sure there are a lot of wonderful things and challenges to that side of things.
Yeah, and for me, I had done it in previous projects.
Yeah.
And it's really enjoyable to me. It's interesting because so much of game development, there's a lot of reasons why it's enjoyable. Like, you get to work with these actors who are an amazing type of person in general, because they are able to just be very charismatic, sort of at the drop of a hat, and they're able to improvise stuff. And they have all these skills that normal humans do not, shall we say. So that's just a lot of fun. And also as a writer, it's always nice to have written something. If you get the right actor, I find anyway, that it sounds way better than I even ever imagined. Like there's a lot of writers who are like, that's not what I was thinking. I'm always someone who just welcomes that new layer of interpretation a good actor brings in. And specifically for games, it's funny. Often in games, we iterate a lot, right? We can change the art, we can change the programming, we can change whatever up until the last minute. Voice acting, though, has a special thing where often you don't want to redo the voice acting because you got to get a studio, you got to get the actor in there, all this stuff. Yeah. So it's like a deadline you have to work to, and you have to get all of this voice stuff done, and you may not ever get to redo it. So it sort of forces the writer, the team, etc., to really say, no, this is really the final stuff. And it's nice to put a stake in the ground and say, we're done with that part, because we don't want to go back and redo it, because it's not as easy as changing a model or something like that. So so I like that sort of production side of it as well. But it does force you to think through all of the things that you have to commit to when you're doing a voiceover session. So
well, like you have to commit to the script, I assume.
Right, exactly. And if the narrative and the gameplay are tied together, you're sort of committing to the game design as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you did get to work with some voice acting powerhouses of Ellen and John. How did you actually find them, like meet them, and get them involved in this project in the first place?
Yeah, I had worked with John on the Suffering games years ago and had just loved working with him. And he's local in Seattle. Yeah. Just one reason for his ties to Valve, because they're up here as well. So I just knew he was great and was of the right demeanor to do this character. So actually, before I really even started working on it and was thinking seriously about doing it, I had lunch with him and was just like, would you like to be involved with this project? And he was like, absolutely, it sounds great. And he was, he's a little bit older than me. So in the 70s, he was actually a traveling musician, is kind of a hippie himself a little bit. He could explain it better, but I just found that interesting to have someone on the project who was really around for that era, when the cult groups were happening and different, social movements were happening. Yeah. So that was great. And I had always thought, well, I don't want to have, though often cults are often led by a single person, there are a few exceptions. I just thought, knowing from the beginning the design was to have the cult leaders talking with the PA system, I didn't want to have it just be one voice, because that might get too monotonous. So I thought we should have two. It'd be cool if they were a man and woman, or a husband and wife, seemed to float naturally out of that, because you will have religious churches and stuff that are led by a couple. That's fairly common today, actually. And then I thought, well, who's a good female actor who, isn't John married to one? So I just thought that was cool. I hadn't met her before, but I asked John, well, do you think Ellen would want to do it too? And he was like, absolutely. Well, wait, let me ask her. But hang on. But he was right that she was interested. And then we had lunch and talked about the game. And, there was some me pitching her like the concepts and stuff. Yeah. But she was on board as well. So that was great. And I guess just to circle back, that new trailer we just showed had some of our other voice actors in it as well. Yeah. They were both veterans from the Suffering game, so 3/4 of the cast is Suffering people. But one of them is Rafita Keys, who played the character of Carmen in the Suffering games, and it was just great to work with back then. And I knew she could play several different characters among the civilians that you meet, or the cult members. And then the other one is Arif Kinchin, who was also in the second Suffering game, and he's also known for being one of the stars of the Saints Row franchise, and has done a lot of other voice acting work as well. So getting him back was also cool, and just brought all those different types of characters to the game. Yeah, pretty great lineup of really talented folks. In fact, I think you posted on the dev blog, I'm cheating a bit and pulling it up here, recently, about all of these lovely people. Relatively recently. Anyway, where'd it go? Well, at some point I'll find that and post it in the chat, because it is lovely. Seeing also some behind the scenes pictures of you all in booths. Oh, it was from back when
a little bit ago. So I'll post that in the chat here so you guys can all check out the dev blog and specifically that post. See a little bit behind the scenes pictures from the making of the Church in the Darkness. Very cool, very cool.
Another question from the chat there I saw was, how do you get the emotion out of the actors in the booth and getting them to do it? The key is casting.
Mm-hmm.
And they say that your most of the work is done at the casting stage. Like if you get the right person, they can do that. If you get the wrong person, no amount of directing is going to make them do that, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I like using experienced people, because it's like a lot of that work has happened in their previous projects and they've gotten used to voiceover and they've gotten used to video games. So that it's getting those right people in there. And then I'm just amazed with, sometimes you can just say, yeah, I don't know. What else do you have? And then they'll just do another take that's totally different. You'll say, oh, that's more it.
Yeah.
Because there is, danger of sort of over directing them and stuff. So I try to brief them on the character as much as possible ahead of time, let them know, here's the type of thing we're going for with this. What do you think? You have any other ideas? Do you get where they're coming from? And then once you're rolling, the lines are just going. Once they're in the zone, it's just, you don't have to do much direction except for like maybe a little louder, a little faster on that one and something. And that's most of the work at that point.
Yeah. How much information is that you give them ahead of time? You say you give them a little bit. Are you giving backstory? Are you giving an emotional goal for the lines, or how much?
Yeah. For this game, we actually did rehearsals.
Oh, nice.
Was great, which you often don't get to do in games because schedule and time and so forth. But talking, I mentioned that I met with John and Ellen before they were in the game just to try to get them to do the game, and a lot of that was explaining where these people were coming from. Do they believe it? And they had a lot of input too to the narrative of saying, well, I think maybe they would use these words instead, or but they really do this, or isn't it all about this with him? And then I would go back and incorporate that, after we did a rehearsal, I'd go back and do rewrites based on that, or maybe add some new stuff. I remember there was one session where, towards the end where John had said, I'm surprised you haven't complained about Kissinger in this, because, Kissinger was not well liked by counterculture for sure. Anyone progressive in the 70s. And he's like, you're going after all these 70s groups. How is Kissinger immune? So then for the next session, I had Ellen talk about Kissinger.
Nice.
And she was like, wow, this is really intense. I was like, well, it was John's idea.
Yeah. That's really cool. Ugh. Huh. Yeah, how much of the script was actually I was going to ask how much of it was sort of pulled directly from examples that you saw out there? How much of it was sort of you creating this world and building within? Yeah, that's a vague question.
No, I mean it's not so much that definitely I spent in the research phase, and I just love doing research because it's you've got a new subject and trying to see as you're doing it which parts can you pull into your game. So yeah, definitely looking at those various counterculture movements from that era. There were certain things that they tended to hit in terms of complaints about the status quo. So a lot of the topics were pulled from that. The specific way these characters talk about it was very much their specific characters, though. So it would be like, here's a subject. How would Rebecca talk about that? How would Isaac talk about that?
Yeah.
And they're not carbon copies of each other either. So Isaac is more spiritual side, a little more religious. Ellen is a little more on the political side, a little more stridently socialist. So it's interesting to sort of play them against each other. And in the game, they may not agree with each other either about a lot of stuff. In different scenarios, you'll hear them fighting, basically. So, a lot of it pulled from real world stuff, but put into their specific voices. The characters that I developed with them. So with Ellen and John. So.
Actually, yeah, and a good question in the chat is, are there political messages in the game, or rather questions that you want people to self-reflect on? I think it's very much the latter, where there are certainly political themes in the game, like they're in the that are present. A lot of the characters have their own politics, but I don't think that there's a message necessarily to the game. Rather, it's that the player is put into this scenario and invited to explore and draw their own conclusions.
Yes, absolutely. And I think people, depending how they feel about particular strains of Christianity or how they feel about socialism or how they feel about America, they will have their own interpretation of, are these people doing the right thing or not? And they'll bring that to the game. And I want them to bring that to the game because that then becomes part of the choices they make while they're playing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that they make the choices the first time they play through that lead to a certain ending. And they're like, oh, I see how that flows out of this. Maybe next time I'll try something different just to see what happens. And then maybe they realize they like that better. And so definitely I love players bringing themselves to the game. I like to say the game isn't really done until the players have played it, particularly in a case where the story is coming out of what you do. So yeah, absolutely self-reflection.
Yeah, definitely. And that was a really good question. Thank you. That is, we are just about running out of time today for today's stream, but Richard, you are going to be exhibiting The Church in the Darkness as a part of Ludonarracon, which is very exciting. Are you able to tell us, I'm putting you on the spot here, but are you able to tell us anything about what you will be showing during your live stream for the event?
Yeah, I've got some ideas. We're definitely going to be doing some of this, just some chatting about stuff. And I'd love to get John and Ellen on here. I'm checking on their schedules. That would be cool. I'd love to definitely, in some of the other slots, play the game and talk about the game with different people who are game people or other developers or stuff. So I'm working on some ideas for some of that. And definitely want to get my technology working.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I've not done
As
a lot
you
of
can
streaming,
see.
so it'll be a new one for me, and I'm going to try to do all the testing ahead of time to get it as solid as possible.
Yes.
So.
Yep. All good things will come to all of us for planning.
Those with fast internet connections.
Yeah,
yes.
for real, though, for real, and stable internet connection. I was telling Richard recently, it's not so much about fast, it's about stability.
Yeah.
But what are you gonna do? So yes, just a quick reminder to everyone who is joining us today. Thank you as always for joining us. We love being able to sit down with you and do a little bit of a campfire chat with our wonderful developers such as Richard. Ludonarracon is coming up May 10th, beginning May 10th. You can learn more about that at ludonarracon.com. Also, The Church in the Darkness is coming to you later this year, and you can find out all about that where's the best place for people? I think probably the best thing is to follow the game on Twitter, which you can do at Church Darkness on Twitter.
Yeah. We also like Steam wish lists.
Yes.
If people are interested, I do post in there periodically, and I'll be, as you may know, Ludonarracon is hosted on Steam in some fashion. So that'll be a place to check that out and learn more about the game there. So wish lists are great. Twitter's great. We do have a Facebook page as well, if that's more your jam. And we just have a mailing list, which I like. You can find that at the game's website, which is at paranoidproductions.com/church. You can also just Google it, and that's one of the top 2 links with either Steam or us are usually at the top of those hits. So
yep.
And that can take you to the mailing list. We don't spam you, but you'll definitely know when the game comes out.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. So check those things out to stay up to date on everything going on with The Church in the Darkness. Richard, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Woohoo!
You're so good at acting excited.
Intensity, enthusiasm.
Yes.
All the things you need for a good cult. Right?
Yeah, for real though. You would be a good cult leader if you wanted. If you get tired of game development, just you know what? I know about this.
A cult of one, I think, is what I'd form.
It all starts with one. Okay, well, we are just about out of time here today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We will be back per next time with some more cool, fun stuff about some of the games that we are publishing or cool things related to Ludonarracon. We will see you next time.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.